Hello and welcome to KQED Newsroom. I'm Thuy Vu. Coming up on our program, a roundup of some of the biggest tech stories from Apple to Uber to Yahoo. Plus, some colorful events happening in the Bay Area's arts world. Our senior arts editor shares her top picks. But first, new developments about the 5 protesters who have been on a hunger strike against what they say are injustices in the San Francisco Police Department. This afternoon, the Frisco 5, as they're known, were all hospitalized due to deteriorating health. This caps a week where hundreds marched on City Hall to call for the firing of San Francisco Police Chief Greg Suhr. The hunger strikers led the march. They claim Chief Suhr has allowed a culture of racial bias and excessive use of force. They're protesting several police shootings, including the deaths of 2 men, Mario Woods in December and Luis Gongora last month. Joining us now to discuss the growing calls for change are San Francisco Supervisor Malia Cohen, Jonah Owen Lamb, reporter for the San Francisco Examiner, and Demarris Evans, who chairs the Racial Justice Committee of the San Francisco Public Defender's Office. Welcome to you all.
Thank you.
Jonah, I want to start with you regarding the news about the hospitalization of the hunger strikers late today. What does this mean? Will the hunger strike be ending?
At this point, I think it's just a stall. At this point, they're just in the hospital. It's hard to say whether they're going to come back or not, so we just have to wait and see.
Okay. And who are they? What can you tell us about them?
Most of them are either born and raised in San Francisco or came here a long time ago. You know, all of them except for one are in their late 30s or 40s. And they've been involved in activism at least since the shooting death of Mario Woods in December. So they've been involved in these efforts to make accountability come to the police department. And I think this is just the latest and most drastic kind of move that they've taken in this movement.
Yeah, and they want Chief Suhr to step down or be removed from his post. Will they accept anything short of that?
I think that they see it as a signal that when things are done in the police department by the police, that someone is at fault. Someone has to actually be responsible. And until that happens, I don't think they're going to be satisfied, because even though the city, the mayor, and others have been pushing for reforms, a lot of those reforms aren't as far as they would like things to go. And so I think that they obviously have gone to this point and are willing to risk their health because they really believe that the chief needs to go, and that's kind of the message that needs to be sent, and otherwise that's not really going to what they want. And
things have gotten pretty heated. The Chief Suhr has received death threats. We did reach out to him to be part of the program today. He declined, but his public information officer, Albi Esparza, sent us this statement saying, as for the response to the chief's removal, the chief has repeatedly stated he will not step down as he has been working on police reform matters and intends to stay and see that those are implemented in the SFPD and move the department forward. And Mayor Lee has consistently supported Chief Suhr as well. And Supervisor Cohen, I wanted to ask you about last December's Mario Woods shooting, because you were quite vocal. I mean, you came out and said the officers who fatally shot Woods were an ethnically diverse firing squad, in your words. Is the SFPD doing enough on the reform front?
Well, they certainly have, since December 2nd, have made several changes to the use of force. They have revived conversations around body cameras, tasers. I mean, many of the conversations that they have had before that they're reviving now. There has been a significant number of changes within the use of force policy within the police department. I know my office has been responsible on bringing and drafting resolutions as well as legislation that we're looking to bring to voters this June 7th that will help bring accountability and transparency to officer-involved shootings.
So you were actually in the Board of Supervisors chambers when protesters marched this week, and we have a clip from that. Let's take a look at what happened.
This board, to get the mayor to fire the chief, a chief who's allowed these cops to kill black and brown people indiscriminately.
He is lying. So in this environment, Supervisor Cohen, obviously very heated, do you feel that there's a chance that what you're trying to say about the ongoing reforms will be heard?
Oh, yeah.
by the protesters, though.
By the protesters, it's interesting. I think that the protesters, I can totally connect and empathize with their level of frustration. And I think that for the protesters, it's manifesting in ways of stopping traffic, protesting. In this last 15 days, it's been hunger striking. Totally acceptable and, I believe, warranted responses to what's been happening. My role as a legislator is a little bit different. My role is to create legislation and to move the conversation from almost from the protest level and move it up so that it's sustainable changes that we're talking about. Complementing the work that State Senator Mark Leno has been doing on a state level to bring transparency and accountability to law enforcement.
I think it's important to look here at these reforms and the relationship to the activists who are pushing for them. I mean, nobody can really say whether or not these things would have happened anyway, but you've had a real concerted effort by folks in this city after Mario Woods was killed to push elected officials to do these things. And before that, you had a year or more of like Black Lives Matter protests. There wasn't really one event that happened in San Francisco that helped push things. And then Mario Woods happened, and you have
like a
trigger that really made things happen. And I really think this would not be the case if that hadn't been going on.
And Demarris, I want to bring you in as well, because the Mario Woods was sort of a trigger for your Racial Justice Committee in the sense that you have now come out with recommendations to this Board of Supervisors, and you're demanding that an independent Office of Citizens Complaint be established. You also want a separate Internal Affairs Division focusing on racism issues. How will that make a difference since there's already an OCC and there's already an Internal Affairs Department?
Well, we're asking for an independent Office of Citizens Complaint to be created, because right now the Office of Citizens Complaints is under the same budget as the police department. In 2015, the Office of Citizens Complaints did not sustain one single complaint of racial bias against the police department.
How many were filed?
I don't know exactly how many were filed, but you can see from the culture of the police department with the killing of Mario Woods, with the racist text messages that have come out, that there has been an endemic problem with the San Francisco Police Department. So, and we see as public defenders in and day out cases where there are challenges with arrests. And so the fact that the OCC has a very low level of sustaining complaints against the police department when you have an endemic culture that's been demonstrated by the text messages, by the killings, by the tape that was released with Sergeant Broberg to Chief Suhr, that there is certainly a problem significant enough that people are willing to put their lives on the line to make sure that something happens, that there's some change. So the Office of Citizens Complaints, in alignment with what Supervisor Cohen said about the transparency legislation, if we can see some of the problems that are happening with the police officers, then the community could feel more safe. They can actually see that there's change that's happening. They can see that officers are being held accountable for their actions. Right now, there's this culture of covering up things, and we would not have even found out about these racist text messages had both the first text gate with the first group of officers, who was 14 to 16 officers who were exchanging racist text messages. We would not have found out about that had there not been a criminal investigation. The same thing with the most recent text scandal.
And to speak further about the issue of culture, is there also a culture of denial in the police department, or at the very least a culture of failing to obey or enforce existing policy? Because there are policies in place on de-escalation and other techniques.
I mean, that's the real question, because you have these new policies being put into place and this promise of reforms. And a lot of people say, you know, we've had reforms in the past, and the department doesn't seem to be pushing through with those, or at least putting them into place. So they wonder, who cares if you have new policies if you have a department and a culture in that department that refuses to really follow through with those reforms? And before all of this happened, we had a resolution that, and this kind of, I think, speaks to the culture of the department. We had a resolution simply supporting Black Lives Matter on the Board of Supervisors, put forward by Avalos, and the Police Officers Association came out virulently against that, and it was like a non-binding resolution. That's an example of the kind of culture that was existing before Mario Woods and that whole killing was captured and kind of changed things.
But I would also add the environment that these policies are being created has also changed. There is a new heightened of awareness and accountability that I think that every San Franciscan is starting to feel. Whether you're thinking about the Sandra Bland, Mike Gardner, and some of the other murders that have happened across the entire country. You're watching Ferguson go up in flames just a few years ago. The environment, and I would even say the tolerance level, because frankly, a lot of this is happening in Black and brown communities. So there is a certain level of tolerance that has allowed this to happen because people have disassociated themselves. They are not victimized by it. So it happens over there.
Well, is it just tolerance or maybe a sense of helplessness?
Well, I think that it has to do with, again, it has to do with tolerance and helplessness. Helplessness in the sense that we have been receiving abuse for years and for generations, and we're finally in a position to change it and demand change, which is what you see with Frisco 5. And what you also see are people, your allies, coming together saying, we agree with you. We are not going to stand by and let this and be silent and let this happen anymore either.
And Demarris, just real quickly, you also want a federal civil rights investigation. Why?
Yes, because right now the San Francisco Police Department is cooperating with the federal Division of Cops, which is a community-based, or they are federal employees, but it is a collaborative review of the San Francisco Police Department. And
so you don't think it has enough teeth?
It doesn't have any teeth. The recommendations that come from the Cops review are the San Francisco Police Department can agree to adopt those resolutions or the recommendations, or they can refuse to adopt them. And at this point, we're asking for the Civil Rights Division of the Federal Department of Justice to investigate the San Francisco Police Department for actual violations of the civil rights of Latino and Black men, and whatever recommendations come from that investigation or findings, that they should be binding on the police department.
Okay, I wholeheartedly agree with what the demands
so you want
that she's put.
Civil rights investigation.
Absolutely, but
too.
one point I do want to say is that Baltimore and the changes that have come across through a COPS investigation has yielded into a civil rights investigation. So there is a certain level, there's a step that we must take before the DOJ comes in and does a civil rights investigation, and that we are satisfying.
Okay, well, thank you all for that discussion. Supervisor Malia Cohen, Jonah Lamb with the San Francisco Examiner, and also Demarris Evans with the Racial Justice Committee. Thank you all.
Thank
Thanks
you. Thanks for having us.
We turn our attention now to big developments in the tech industry. Apple posted its first quarterly sales loss in more than a decade. Is Uber about to put the brakes on surge pricing? And more bad news for Yahoo, which lost a big source of revenue this week. Joining us now to talk about these topics and more are San Jose Mercury News tech columnist Michelle Quinn and NPR technology reporter Aarti Shahani. Hello to you both.
Hi.
Well, Michelle, want to ask you first of all about something else, which is this new group focused on gender diversity in tech, started by Ellen Pao. This is the woman who sued Kleiner Perkins, her former employer, for gender discrimination, lost that case. What does her new initiative projects include, and how will it be different from other efforts out there to improve gender diversity?
Good question. She is joining forces with other women who are sort of notable in the tech industry for speaking out about gender and race and ethnicity disparities in the tech industry. And what they want to do is, first of all, they issued a handbook. Basically, this is how you do it. And from soup to nuts, everything from hiring, promotion, retention, the whole thing. And then they're trying to invite mostly startups to join them and be part of, we will help you build your culture from the beginning. Their argument is, don't grow, and then try to change your culture when you're the size of Google, which is like 55,000 employees. So that's their idea. It's like, they will help companies start at the beginning.
But what does that mean? Will they actually require numbers and metrics? Because so far the issue has been that you can say you can include more diversity, more women, more Latinos, more African Americans, whatever. But unless there's a basic starting point with the numbers from where you started, how do you measure that, Aarti?
Right. Well, I mean, I think that part of the proposition here is that there's actually many more women, many more minorities, underrepresented minorities who are not being hired. And there's actually evidence of that. So for example, Intel a few months ago released its own transparency report on diversity and actually showed that they were able to surpass their goal in female hires. Now, what does that tell you? It tells you there's a talent pool out there. And I know that Intel CEO, he actually told me in an interview, I don't really think that the pipeline problem that everyone's talking about is such a problem. That's his now working idea. And so
I just want to ask something about Intel, because this came up in conversation with this Project Include, is that Intel also showed African American employee percentage was shrinking. And what Project Include says is, well, you can bring people in, but if you don't actually work on the culture.
Retention.
Right,
exactly.
and it's something that Intel said as well. So it's, but it's, what I'm worried about is what's going to happen if we do have a downturn. What I noticed before, that tech kind of gets interested in diversity and gets a diversity bug when there's a talent shortage, and they want to basically signal, hey, we're one of those cool companies that care about this issue. But when the economy starts to tank a little bit, or the stock market, as it has been for tech, then what happens?
Who loses the jobs, right? Aarti, you also had an interesting story about Uber, and in it you said that Uber may be ending its controversial practice of surge pricing. Is that right? When? And a lot of people out there are probably going, when and how?
Exactly.
Yeah. So I did report this story, and I want to set some things very straight for the record. My reporting on Uber, reporting that they are planning to end surge pricing, is based on an on-the-record recorded interview I did with one of their leading technologists. Now, one of their leading technologists told me this fact of work that he is working on currently, not in the future. We're not talking about self-driving cars 20 years from now. We're talking about surge pricing right now. What he explained to me is, in the company, we think that there is a problem or we think there's an issue with supply and demand not meeting. And why do you have surge? Why is it you open your app and you get 4x the price sometimes? Why is it that you're a driver sometimes who's able to make 400% more? it's because there's a mismatch between supply and demand.
Meaning
now,
demand outstrips with the supply,
absolutely.
And so therefore you have to pay more for your ride.
Exactly, and only the people willing to pay more get a ride. Now, Uber, the company, knows that customers don't like surge pricing. You know, like you ever take an Uber car and we don't like it. So on the one hand, he was explaining to me something that is great news for customers. This is something he's working on, and they basically believe that through predictive analytics, getting more information about specific regions, studying patterns, he said, you know, you can basically start to predict where supply is going to be and more proactively, where demand will be, and more proactively get the drivers there before surge ever has to happen.
So big question though, when will that happen, or that's unanswered at this point?
Well, what he explained to me is that this is something that they are already working on. So what is unclear is whether this is frankly already happening in certain markets and we just don't get news about it because they're phasing it in, or did Uber at some point plan to make a big announcement about it in the future? I'm guessing that they never wanted to make an announcement.
I want to ask you about this because I thought that they had a big response to this. It was funny to me because I would expect Uber to be working on this issue, very issue, but they said something.
We're going to have to move through this quickly, though. Answer that quickly.
Uber, in a move that I find baffling, Uber, on the one hand, said that my reporting was completely correct. They did not ask for any correction of my reporting. But then when other news outlets called them to ask, is it true or not, they said the story is wrong.
Okay. All right. So the debate continues.
Or the facts stand.
Okay. All right. From the reporter herself. I have to move on to Yahoo. Last month, Yahoo started receiving bids for the sale of its company. What parts would be most lucrative, and who's interested in buying it at this point?
Well, apparently there's about 10 bidders. Number one, probably Verizon. And what they want are, Yahoo still has some fantastic properties. Yahoo Finance, Yahoo Sports, Yahoo News, Mail, Weather, Fantasy Sports. So it's still one of the main attractive web properties out there. And, you know, you've got this great content. But the problem is and they, how strong is that product going to be by the time the buyers get to it? And we had some extra news this week that AT&T was dropping them as a web portal. Yeah. So that created some issues too. But
so they're continuing to struggle, definitely.
They're continuing to struggle.
Okay.
It's like a series of bad news for them.
All right. And Aarti, I have to ask you really quickly about Apple, latest earnings, disappointment. Revenues fell by 13%. First time in 13 years. Why the decline?
Basically, Apple really needs a new market, like a big, big win. Apple won the U.S. market. They did really well in China. Now they're hoping that India really warms up to them, and it's a big play with a lot of question marks because the Indian buyer might be more price sensitive and might not want to pay $600 for an iPhone because they're really happy with their Samsung luxury phone that costs under $200 converting. So Apple's it's struggling to find who is going to buy. And one thing that they might do is move away from just banking on the iPhone as their killer product, push more of the tablets, and then also more software partnerships to try to basically be more of a competitor with Microsoft when it comes to serving companies.
Okay, we'll see if a pivot is in order from them. Thank you to you both, Michelle Quinn with the Mercury News and NPR's tech reporter, Aarti Shahani.
Thank you.
Playing roulette with a Shakespeare classic, a free pop-up concert series you may not want to miss, and an exciting new art exhibition that gives reflection on the region's Latino heritage. These are just some of the events going on in the Bay Area art scene. And KQED senior arts editor Chloe Veltman joins us now with her picks. Hi, Chloe.
Hello, Thuy. It's lovely to see you.
Good to see you. First, Shakespeare's Hamlet is at Shotgun Players in Berkeley, and this is a rather unusual way to approach it, right? The classic gets a pretty radical twist here among the actors. Tell us about that.
Yeah, so this is not your usual Hamlet at all because the actors are on stage at the beginning and they pull out of Yorick's skull, actually, what role they're going to play that night. So the actors don't actually know what part in the play they're going to be doing on stage until 5 minutes right before.
That's gotta be nerve-wracking.
It's absolutely nerve-wracking. I think that it's been described to me by the actors as a surreal experience, one that's kind of lumpy because some nights, sometimes invariably they'll get to play one role more than another, so one role may not be as up to snuff as the others.
And then what is it like for the audience? You saw the show. I mean, what is that experience like?
Well, it's very exciting. Well, first of all, because you don't know who's going to be playing Hamlet. And so sometimes it might be an older African-American member of the cast, or it could be a young woman or anyone in between. And I think also it helps you to appreciate this play as a play about acting. It's a play about actors. It's sort of reimagining, it's reconfiguring it, and it gives you such an appreciation for the craft of acting.
And it probably gives the audience also a chance to sort of re-examine their preconceptions of what theater is.
Well, yeah, absolutely. Everyone has this one idea of what Hamlet is, or a series of ideas, and it usually involves this one male actor playing this archetypal role. But here we have a way to experience the play as something entirely other. It's really about Hamlet being all of us in a sense. It could be anyone.
All right, in San Jose, there's an exhibition of new and exciting work by Latino artists as well.
That's right. This is the Latino Art Now exhibition. It's in its 18th year, and it's at MACLA, which is the Latino Art and Culture Center that's down in San Jose. There's some wonderful works on display. There's a real variety of artists. Some of them have Bay Area ties. Some of them are nationally known. People like Esther Hernandez, who's a wonderful Chicano visual artist, whose work is in the Smithsonian and SF MoMA, among others.
That looks wonderful. On the music scene, also a rather bittersweet moment for the Cypress String Quartet. They'll be performing their last show after 20 years together.
That's right. Yeah, this is a very eminent quartet. They tour internationally, very well known, and they're saying goodbye to the city in this unusual way. They're really into Beethoven, and they're going to be performing between now and May the 19th. Every day they're doing a pop-up concert in a different part of the city, and it's always a Beethoven quartet every day. And I happened to be at the concert yesterday, which was in the Outer Sunset. Let's take a listen. And you can hear the quartet performing a different quartet by Beethoven in different locations, for example, the Mission Dolores Park, Sutro Bars, and so on.
Okay, well, catch them while you can. Last chance, right? And of course, we've got to talk about MoMA, probably the biggest local art story going on right now. A lot of buzz on that, around that. It reopens May 14th.
May 14th, it's been closed for 3 years. It's massive. People get to burn a lot of shoe leather going around there. And yeah, it's been getting a lot of international press, and it's going to be packed out when it opens too.
What are your favorite pieces?
Oh, there are so many things. I am very fond of the Alexander Calder room. I also really like the sculpture garden outside with its beautiful living wall. And finally, I'm a big fan of the Agnes Martin room, part of the Fisher collection on the 4th floor. Seeing those paintings organised in this special sort of hexagonal-shaped church almost. It's like a temple to art. It's really beautiful.
And there's so much there, and it's so big now. You can't really experience it in just one day anymore.
No, it's true. I mean, it's really, you need to go back day after day after day. I mean, that's why, you know, I think it's a good idea to get a membership in a way. It's the much better value way of experiencing the museum if you're local.
Yeah, and maybe pick a couple of floors per day, right?
Yeah.
And really get a chance to enjoy it.
Exactly.
All right. Chloe, always good to have you on.
It's lovely to see you, Thuy.
And of course, for more information about MoMA's opening online and also the other events that you mentioned, we have much more information on kqed.org/arts. Also, a quick note, we will have the museum's director, Neil Benesra, on our show next week talking about MoMA, and also with Bob Fisher, who is the son of the original collectors behind the Fisher collection. I'm Thuy Vu. Thanks so much for watching. For all of KQED's news coverage, please go to kqednews.org.